So my presentation is about those who have been dubbed the children of the Caliphate, referring to the children of Europeans who have traveled to Syria from 2012 to more or less 2015 to join the ranks of the rebel groups fighting against Bashar al-Assad that would then result in the civil war. Now we know that a substantial proportion of these European fighters would also end up joining Daesh or ISIS, the Islamic State. Now, what I'm trying to do in my presentation is to reflect not only about the situation of the European fighters, but also about their children, because a substantial amount of them has either traveled with children. It's actually a minority that traveled with children, but a substantial amount has also had children in the region. We know that there are about more or less 5,000 Europeans who have traveled to Syria. Many have returned, many have died, but there are still a couple of hundred who are in camps that are overlooked by Kurds in Syria, and a couple of hundred also European children in these camps. Now, our European states are quite, you could say, divided about how to relate to this reality, and especially the problem of the children. While several countries have asserted that these children, as themselves, are not guilty of anything, right, and that they're innocent, and that they should be normally and in principle repatriated, we also observe that most of the states have failed to, you could say, to pull this decision through and to repatriate these children. An example is Belgium, for instance, the country where I'm located and where my presentation focuses particularly on the case of Belgium. So there are about more or less 60 children in the camps that are overlooked by the Kurds, in addition to more or less 50 adults. The state has declared in 2017 that it was willing to repatriate, or it was willing to welcome, not repatriate, but welcome and include all the children until the age of 10. After 10, it would become a case-by-case approach. But we witnessed that in reality and in practice, hardly any of those children has been brought back to Belgium. We have had a few children returned in around before the summer, around May. And 4 children have returned also 4 weeks ago. The first batch of children were orphans. The other children were returned to Belgium because their mothers had crossed the border to Turkey and are now in Turkey. But in practice, we see that the state is not taking any steps, real steps, I mean diplomatic steps yet, but no practical steps to go and repatriate the children. The first important reason is because a repatriation of the children would de facto also imply the repatriation of the parents, so that's also why the states are opposed to it. The situation of the parents is a very difficult one and controversial one, so all European states oppose the return of the parents, are politically opposed to their return. Several countries have also moved to stripping away, taking away, removing the citizenship of these parents, especially the holders of a dual nationality. That's the case for the UK, for Belgium, for Denmark, for instance. And the public opinion is also largely opposed to the repatriation of the parents, or the return of the parents. And so as a result, the states have decided not to take any active steps in the repatriation of the children, because that could imply also the repatriation of the parents immediately, or later the parents could, you could say, apply for family reunification. Today we are, for instance, in Belgium in a situation where the state has declared its willingness to repatriate only the children, so the children only, which would imply a separation of the children from the parents. The mothers in the camps are understandably opposed to that scenario. Experts, academics are also opposed to that scenario. Security officials are also opposed to that scenario. So we witness a situation in Belgium today where security experts, academics are, you could say, advocating the repatriation of the parents and the children for humanitarian but also for security purposes, whereas the political world and the politicians, you could say, are opposed to the repatriation of the adults. But so this is the first reason why the states are opposed. The second reason is because these children, and that's of course also what I try to reflect upon in this paper, these children seem to uphold an ambivalent status. While we can say that these children as children are innocent, when we look at the discourse, the social discourse, the media discourse, but also the policy briefings or security discourse, intel around these children, we see that they somehow adopt an ambivalent position. There are certain concerns about their exposure to extremist worldviews as they are described in the policy documents. There are concerns about the fact that their trauma could also, you could say, instigate a possible, you could say, forms of dysfunctions that could result into a security threat. So we can see that these children, simply by virtue of being, you could say, raised in a context that is a war context, you could say, which in general or in no normal situation would turn them into children that are at risk and are innocent and need to be saved, in this particular case turns them into children that could possibly be a risk. Overall, what I try to do in the presentation is to think about the stages of these children, of what we consider to be the enemies and those who we consider to be terrorists and are accused of terrorism, condemned of terrorism, and thus seen as an enemy, who are subjected to, you could say, measures of exceptional measures or state of exception measures, extraordinary detention, you could say in this case stripping of citizenship or banning, so these parents are not allowed to return, which comes on top of their, you could say, legal condemnation, because most of them are already condemned for imprisonment. So on top of that, they're also banned. So these extraordinary measures, I'm trying to reflect on the stages of the children of the so-called, of those who we consider to be our enemies, and the kind of also collateral damage that they are experiencing, and also the kind of specific extrajudicial stages they seem to inhabit.